Stay right there in Matthew chapter 5. What we're going to be looking at this morning. Preached to you recently on the Beatitudes, verses 1 through 12. We're going to be looking at some other things in more depth than we have previously from Matthew 5 and verses, 13 through 17, and then skip down a little bit. I actually want to start out with something that was from verse 20. I say unto you that except your righteousness exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall by no means enter into the kingdom of heaven. Exceeding righteousness is kind of like a theme through the whole section here as you're dealing with the Sermon on the Mount. It helped me to understand a whole lot more about the Sermon on the Mount in the sense of just kind of getting a grasp of the whole general idea. Connie's brother, sometimes he comes up with some harebrained ideas like who wrote Hebrews and stuff like that. But every now and then we agree on some things, and really it's just some things he just told me I didn't even know. So he was talking to me one time. He says, I believe Matthew 5 verse 20, except you have exceeding righteousness, is really the hub of and the central theme and idea that governs the whole Sermon on the Mount. And the more I study on it, the more I think, yeah, he's probably about right. Because Jesus was trying to get us to see it's not in that Moses said, do this and don't do that. He was talking about, I want from your heart you to be the Christian example that you need to be. And God could fill this whole church building and all the others that exist with one example after another, couldn't He? You couldn't have a Bible big enough for that. You cannot give somebody a law, a set of rules, and that's going to cover everything. So what He did is He gave us the law of Christ, the system of faith. And faith, even though it doesn't cover the details, it says wherever you are, whatever you do in life, you need to have exceeding righteousness by from your heart giving a Christian example. Two things He uses for illustration. I thought about the idea of a candle or something, but knowing me, I don't know, fire alarm goes off, get excited, knock it over. Next thing you know, you got a burn spot over there, and Larry and Shelby are trying to clean it up and everything. It'd be bad. So didn't go into that. Salt is kind of small to make a visual example of, but you get the idea from the two things that He mentions in Matthew 5, 13 through 16. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its savor, its saltiness, tastiness, wherewith shall it be salted? It is henceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and trodden under the foot of men. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but upon a candlestick, that it may give light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. In picking apart these few verses here, how do these illustrations help us to have exceeding righteousness, which I believe is the thematic passage and what He's getting at, which He's going to mention down there in verse 20. He was talking to Jews. You have all these rules and regulations, but you need to have it come from the heart. God isn't going to give you a bunch of rules and regulations in the New Testament. He's basically going to say, you be grateful to me, worship me, just be good. Well, how do we be good? He says, you need to know two things. You are the salt of the earth. You know, it's a funny thing, but you can buy salt and you can keep it put up in your pantry, and as long as the conditions don't change, you know, it get real hot, I mean real hot, hotter than it'd get in a normal house, or something that doesn't come along and mix a bunch of crud in it, dust, you know, things like that, that salt is pretty much going to stay there, and whenever you get ready to season with it, it's good for cooking, isn't it? It's good. So somebody wonders, how could Jesus say if the salt has lost its savor? I've never had salt that lost its savor. Well, maybe you hadn't, but if you think about it, they didn't have a lot of refining factories back in Jesus' day, did they? you had blocks of salt. And there were a lot of other minerals probably down in that and such as well. And the conditions that we have in air conditioning were not controlled, were they? It might get to be where that salt is not perceived as being worth much. Maybe they were storing the salt near their cooking or kiln oven. And so they've got these big ovens and everything. They're preparing and all that. And I'm told that they would put salt nearby and such. And maybe over the process of time of heating and cooling and everything, and it's picked up particulates, and you got some melting going on, and then coagulation, and it grabs hold of it. And after a while, people are looking at, we can't use this for anything. What's it good for? Well, when I was a boy, I found out that I could take salt. Why I did this, I don't know. Probably because salt is cheap. It's still cheap. And it's found everywhere. But I could take salt, and I could use it on all kinds of nature's poor creatures and plants and cause havoc. I don't need to necessarily give you the full image, but you know, some animals like to be kind of wet and slimy. But you put salt on them and they're not wet and slimy anymore. They're also not alive anymore. You can put salt down, and if there is a weed that is growing there, Roundup isn't going to do any better. Dead. What does salt do? They put it in the roadway. Let's keep the roadway clear. Well, here's some I can't use anymore for eating. It's lost its savor. Throw it down. That'll do fine. One doesn't grow in there. Salt her down. If you have salt, it's going to have an effect. It can be a killing effect, or it could be good for taste. Good for taste. It is the case that many people are spreading salt of different kinds, and they don't even realize what all they're spreading. I didn't know the man, but a few days ago I saw him there at the store. I had bought some gas and needed a receipt or something. He was standing at the counter and I was waiting behind him. The man had obviously had some sort of stroke or similar condition, because it did not seem that he had any use for his right side. And his other side seemed to be fairly weak. I had to wait for a long time behind him, not because of his condition though, but because he was using his one movable hand in order, from what I could tell, to pick his numbers for his lotto ticket. Now, in a way, that's kind of amusing. In another way, I thought it was sad. Here is a man who has been given a second lease on life, who probably in earlier ages of man would have died from whatever it is he had gone through. Half of his body perhaps has been taken from him, and even though it's taking him a while, he can stand there, and in my presence, therefore an influence on me, in the presence of the cashier, therefore an influence on them, and anybody else that might walk in from the public, he's letting the world know that I am so grateful that I'm going to take whatever is given to me and waste it. In the hopes of what? In the hopes of getting something for nothing. My friend, God's given you a second lease on life. And if you're not a little baby or something anymore, every day of your life is that much closer to judgment you're getting, and you're going to spend that time being that kind of an influence? No, the Lord didn't call us to that. And you don't have to have suffered some incredible debilitating disease or some sort of bad accident or whatever in order for you to know that. You know God expects more from us than that. Be the salt of the earth, He says. There's not much better, according to Brother Terry Jones, than when you pull out one of those big, long, hot McDonald's fries. Am I got that right? Yeah. They're good. They're good. I don't know what kind of substance they put in them to make them, that good, but they're good. You know what makes them even better is that when they give them to you, they've already taken, if you look at them make them back there, what have they done? Unless you tell them I can't have that. They've salted that up. Now, if you were to see that guy making those fries or cooking them in that deep fat fryer, and then he pulls it out, what if he is salting them, and instead of him just using that prepared salt shaker they have there and going like that, What if he just stands over it going, we're going to give you fries here in just a minute. When you get that fry, it's going to be all salt and no fry, isn't it? Because they already have the natural grease on them, and it's going to stick everywhere. Too much salt, too much salt. What happens is you don't need a huge hunk of salt to have a big effect, do you? Those little bitty grains are all you need. Jesus said salt is good. But if it's lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? Salt is fine, but a little bit goes a long way. You got percentage-wise 1-2% of the people being Christians in any given area or whatever. Well, what do you do about those few people that are Christians? You see the good that they do because it stands out so much. It has such an effect. It's like salt, Jesus said. You're the salt of the earth. You want to season the world with goodness, kindness. You want to season the world with truth. Bring the world back to reality when it seems like it's getting crazy and going away from itself. Bring the world back to what is right when it seems like they want to stand for everything else. And when that happens, Jesus said, you're not just salt of the earth, but you're also a beacon of light. Let your light so shine before men. That word "so" is so important, isn't it? How you like that pun? The word "so" is so important. Let your light so shine. That is, in this manner, let it shine. If you're going to let your light shine before others, that means that that light is something you don't want to hide, but you say, I don't want to boast about it either. And it's kind of hard to know how to let my light shine. It is, but let me talk to you about how hard it can be and also how good it can be. One of the things that's hard about letting your light shine is that it's hard to let your light shine when you feel hypocritical. Because then you think, if I go out here and I stand for something, or if I am doing a good deed, other people will think I'm good when I know in my heart that I really am not. And that makes it harder and harder for you to let that light shine. Another thing is, though, is that sometimes we kind of like the idea of the spotlight being on us. Yeah, I'm shining. You are the light of the world. Let your light so shine. So instead of us reflecting Jesus, just like the light from the sun is reflected by the moon back on the earth. So you got the sun, and say the earth's down here, and the moon's over here. The light at nighttime is hitting that moon. It reflects back on the earth. Even in an area that is on the other side, you see, of that sun. It'd normally be totally dark. But that moon is reflecting that light. That's the way we operate. Jesus is the source, the power, the dynamo that makes it light up. But I'm reflecting the light of Christ. What would make it hard for me to do so? Well, when I draw attention to me, the little light, instead of the sun. That's what makes it hard sometimes. I have done this constantly. I don't know how to tell you how many times. You see somebody, let's say they're by the side of the road, and you see an opportunity to help. You can buy them a meal. If they're broke down, you see what they might need for your car, give them a jump. It could be that they're lacking a little bit on their gas, or they ran out, and going someplace. Any number of things where you see people in some kind of need, or they've had some kind of medical thing going on or whatever, and you call somebody for them or something. Whatever it is you did. And then you hop right back in your car and off you go. And what did you do? You did a good deed for them. And if they learned your name and they like what you did, they say, oh yeah, Tim's a great guy. And I don't know how many times I've caught myself, oh yeah, I'm a good person. I'll bask in that. And then just right after that, I'll start kicking myself. Tim, you didn't tell them you did it because you're a Christian. You didn't tell them you did it because you said that's what Jesus would want me to do. You didn't tell them you did that because that's the kind of thing we do at Willette Church of Christ. You didn't do that in order to get them to say, hey, Jesus is good. I'm glad I ran into a Christian. You did that and then basked in the idea of them saying, oh, Tim's a nice guy. That didn't help any. Then Tim gets all the glory. Let your light so shine that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. That's why it's so hard to be the light of the world. Because first of all, it's difficult because we present hypocritical pictures to people, and we know it. And the second thing is it's hard to be the light of the world because we don't give the glory to God. We don't say the only reason I'm good is not because I'm good, but because Jesus is good. The only reason why I am doing something good for you is because good things have been done for me by the Lord and His church. And it's caused me to be a part of that, and I want to spread that love and good cheer. Here, have a church bulletin, look us up or something. To share some way with them to draw them closer to the Lord. Let your light so shine. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard. The Jews had a hard time with this. If you read there in the intervening verses between verse 16, which is what we're looking at, Matthew 5:16, and verses 17, 18, and 19, leading up to 20, he talks about the law and the prophets. And he says, this old world's going to only last so long, but everything's going to be fulfilled. Everything that it said in the Old Testament law, I'm not against the Old Testament law, it's all going to be fulfilled. I don't want to destroy it, I come to fulfill it. But it's not enough for you to have those old laws of Moses. You have to have exceeding righteousness, he said. Well, that's hard sometimes. I want to present to the world what was inside Jesus. What was inside Him? Truth. Therefore, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things, the matters from Philippians chapter 4 and verse 4. The good stuff. That's what Jesus was all about. I want to reflect that. Okay, but, well, you're going to have to do it different from what they did in the old days. The Jews didn't understand that. So how are we supposed to understand it today? Many times it just gets hard. You've got to do the right thing, and sometimes you're even given an excuse, an out, so that you can get out of doing what's right. Somebody else is going to do it. Nobody else is going to obey the gospel for you. Nobody else can be saved for you, can they? You've got to come to the truth. You've got to know that there's a judgment day arriving, and you have to prepare your own soul. Somebody else can't be saved for you. And maybe somebody else is out there doing good works. But I've not seen anybody complain that there's too many Christians, that we've maybe salted it too much. Have you? I've not seen any complaints of that. A little bit does go a long way, but we need another grain of salt. Just because somebody else has done their part does not excuse you from doing your part. And sometimes, I admit, it is hard. I'll just share this one with you then this morning. The hardest visit, and this isn't even really about me, it's about another person. The hardest visit that I ever made to the nursing home. Now, easy to go to the nursing home. I love going to the nursing home. I love studying with people, reading the Bible to them in the nursing home, because where are they going to go? And so you're working with people in the nursing home. It's great. But there was one time where I knew, and once again, this is not about me. You're about to see what I mean. I knew the condition that this one lady was in. She was suffering from a cancerous growth. It was face cancer. And it was not something where operation was going to help it. This was it. And she was in that room, and I hadn't visited her in a while. I knew I needed to go in there and see her, but I knew what it was like in there. It was taking her over. It was bad. She was still with her faculty. She could talk to you. But it was bad. Everything from the smell to the sight, everything. I can remember sitting in the car out there in the parking lot and telling myself, Tim, this is what you do. You get in there. So I went in there. When I went in there, the hard part was not me to visit her. It was in delivering the message and in seeing how her daughter responded to it. She told me when I got in there, she said, you tell my daughter, because she went to church with us, tell her you don't have to come. You don't come in here. She said, I know it's hard to see me. And you don't have to see me like this. They're taking care of me. Everything's fine. It's okay. I went back to church and I told that woman, I said, here's what your mama said. You can imagine the effect that had on her. What was hard, ladies and gentlemen, was for her to turn right around and say that she was going to go anyway. I don't know that she pretty much just kind of told me that, but that's what she was going to do. That was her mama, and that she was going to take care of everything. And I believe it spiritually built her up more than any other experience of her adult life. I had seen this woman go on fire for the Lord and then back off. You know how some people are like that, hot and cold? When she fought through the hard part to say, I will help my mama until the day she dies, and I will do what is my Christian duty. That was hard for her. And her mama's giving her an out and saying, you don't have to do this. You want to remember me this way? They're taking care of everything. But I believe in the end it ended up helping her and her mama. And really the whole church. It certainly helped me. It motivated me. Why? I was seeing her light shine. And I knew she wasn't doing it for any selfish reason. She was doing it as her Christian duty. To shine forth for all of us to hear about and for us to know that I do this because it's the right thing, because it's the Christian thing. My friends, this morning, what will you do? Even though it may seem hard right now, that is the right thing for you to do, the Christian thing. And if you haven't come to Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of your sins, then before you even ask yourself, how can I use my talents for God? What is the Christian thing? You have to ask yourself, what can I do to get right with God? I want to show them that here's how a soul comes to Jesus. Your very first act of letting that light shine is to come and say, baptize me into Christ. I believe in Jesus as the Son of God. I turn from all my sin and I want to be a Christian this morning. I will come to Jesus now. And when you make that good confession, and when people see your obedience, every amen given to God, every thanks and every prayer that is lifted up before the Father is letting your light shine. Won't you let your light shine this morning? Won't you come to Jesus as we stand and sing?